Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is the General's Talk featuring Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar and Lieutenant General Satish Dua. Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, a retired Director General of the Artillery. He has deep knowledge and understanding of strategic affairs, now a professor in the Aerospace Department of the IIT Madras, a speaker and an author. Lieutenant General Satish Dua, PVSM, UYSM, SM, VSM, has served as the Chief of Integrated Defence Staff to the Chairman of the Chiefs of Staff Committee, a former Corps Commander 15 Corps, today a speaker and an author of a book, India's Brave Hearts. General Shankar, General Dua, sir, welcome to the General's Talk on a very, very important thing which is happening around us, Ukraine. Of course, a lot has been spoken. This video is, as we were just discussing, is going to be an overview of the entire situation, what can we learn about it, and certain possible end games of this war, because at the end of it, this has to come to an end. So welcome, sir. Let's have a great discussion and hope we can reach the right narrative and the right story as far as the Ukraine war is concerned.
Yeah, I think the right narrative and the right story is important because we only had a one-sided affair. So we have to, and very little from the Russian side. But we have to look through the haze, see some facts which have emerged, and base our conclusions on that rather than going by the narratives only. Don't you think so, Satish?
Yeah, also it's very tough to draw lessons or takeaways from an ongoing operation, especially while it is ongoing, because we are everything is in most of the things are in realm of speculation. If we see what are the likely military aims, history will tell us separately, or after the war is over, done and dusted, we'll know more. But today we are making conjunctures, very intelligent assessments, which will be very near the truth, but then it may not be the whole truth. So to draw takeaways and lessons from this will be fraught with one condition, that at the end of it all, we'll have to redo the whole thing again.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I agree with you completely. We might have to have a complete relook and maybe eat our words also. That's okay.
True.
That's the game of an analyst, sir. I think it's more of a reading of a situation sitting thousands of miles away. I mentioned this in the opening short comment that I gave, that it's a contradiction of narratives which is ongoing. Even right now, we see a big war of words about Bucha, the city which has actually experienced a huge amount of loss of people. Where and how and this and that is a totally different story. What I want to talk to you about is the change in nature of warfare, sir. We've seen the addition of a very large multi-domain aspect in this particular, battle. General Dua, sir, I'd like you to start. And what are your thoughts about this entire thing, sir?
So, you took example of Buka. That's fine. We can take one example. But the larger point here is that we are getting only one-sided information. We are seeing what Ukraine is putting out, because most of the video clips and news that is put out is by Ukraine side. It is also aided very much by the Western media, by the tools that the West has, and by all the platforms that West supports. And Russia, on the other hand, is not able to put out this narrative well. Whether it's for want of trying or for capability, that will be known later. On one hand, they have themselves restricted the use of certain major platforms like Facebook, Instagram, etc., as is well known in the news. On the other hand, the Western countries' based systems have restricted their use to Russia. So both things put together, we are getting more one-sided views. In fact, I would go as far as to say that in India, at least, we are in a strange situation. India, for its own reasons of its national interest, is, if not siding with Russia, but is abstaining from voting against Russia, while it is condemning the violence and invasion, etc. So India, she follows this policy. But as far as the media is concerned, all across the board, all the media are demonizing Russia, are bringing out the human side of the war, and things that are happening in Ukraine. So we see a bit of a dichotomy there. But then it's a free world, it's a democracy, and we are all entitled to our opinions. But the last thing I would like to say, that the role, you spoke about the multidimensional aspects of the war. We will talk about multi-domain, and we'll talk about this as discussion progresses. But the importance of information warfare, the importance of a good narrative. Russia has clearly not been able to put this narrative at all, while Ukraine has been able to play that victim card rather well, grounded in reality. But it's the perception of the across the minds across the world that shapes the minds. So. All in all, I think we are seeing this. We are seeing several other spectrum, several other dimensions across the spectrum, which we'll talk about. But this is one important player, other than the kinetics of the war. Jan Shankar?
Yeah, yeah. What, besides what General Dua has brought out, there's a dichotomy between the media, which is following the Western, narrative, and the government, which has taken a neutral stance. And if you go through the social media, especially in Twitter, you find a large following of people who are with Russia and who have at times come out with anti-American, views. This is what has this is a trend line, right? And we don't know what is right actually. The what is the truth is not there; it's all hidden. Even bucha, there you're talking of war crimes and mass graves and all. Whose graves are there? Who did it? Why did it happen? We don't know. It is today. It is the Western world is painting that based on Ukrainian report. It's a one-sided report, so we really can't this thing. The second thing is that there is no doubt that in any war there will be narratives, and narratives will play a large part in shaping perceptions, and these perceptions have to be shaped across internally and externally. Okay, in this, there's no doubt that Ukraine has had a head lead, but the question which today, for many rational thinkers and maybe intelligent thinkers or analytical thinkers, is that is it being overplayed? There's a sense of disbelief coming into that. There's a sense of overhype coming into that. The moment overhype comes, you switch off the TV or whatever, right? And
Credibility.
yeah, the credibility of this information is going down. So when you talk of multi-domain warfare, where information would have played a heavy role in doing things, there's a sense of disbelief sitting in one side, and that disbelief, and there's a sense of hollowness on the other side. So this entire information story said, I feel, is getting cancelled out in the larger picture of things.
That's an interesting perspective, sir. As a matter of fact, the Kiev Independent, which was putting out figures of Russian casualties, had at one time actually put out a tweet saying 12,000 Russian soldiers have died.
Yeah.
And that was rebuffed by even the West, because that's a very large amount of soldiers to have been lost.
Yeah. So that's exactly what Jan Shankar is saying. That when it gets overplayed, it tends to lose credibility. Credibility and reliability are two sides of the coin.
Right. So to that extent, I will only say narrative wars are good, information wars are good, but one has to be careful how do you handle it.
Yeah.
Handle it and not fall for your own trap.
Yeah.
Something that we see around Indian neighborhood quite a bit. Let's talk about the kinetics of this war. So one actually feels somewhere down the line the momentum of a battle is kind of, it's kind of fizzing out. It's rocket attacks, it's aerial strikes, minor skirmishes here and there, but it's not as strong as what it was. Jandua, so how do you feel? Have both the sides kind of lost interest or lost momentum in the kinetics of this war?
Look, some of it is natural. The enthusiasm and the stamina that you set out with will not last forever. It's been much more than a month, and there are bound to be tactical pauses. There are bound to be operational cycles that will enforce a pause. There are bound to be logistic pauses on one hand. Then there is also the issue of a very important issue of operation logistics. For instance, how much ammunition does Russia have? I was reading an article which said so many missiles have been fired and so many anti-tank tank rounds have been fired. How much are they sitting on? Were they prepared for a 30-day war? Because everyone expected everything to be over within a week or so. And that was the general conventional wisdom across the world. But that hasn't happened. So were they prepared for this long drawn out thing? 7 weeks and counting. Sorry, 5 weeks and counting. So true that both sides are losing a bit of momentum. Apart from these things that I just mentioned, I'd like to also say that if the likely aims of the Russians was to seize maximum territory, and I'm assuming that it was like their likely military aim was east of the Dnipro River, uh, eastern part of Ukraine only, because they haven't really addressed the western part beyond the Dnipro River. So, and then east in the east, north in the north, it was to take Kiev. In the east, it was Kharkiv. In the south, it was a corridor, coastal region, to create a corridor, link corridor with the Donbas region, and to take the port city of Odessa, so that uh, Ukraine is denied access to the sea. And when I say this, it appears to me, and we'll talk about the air power and fire power later, but it appears to me, with the use of this being a little restricted, air power especially, maybe the intention was only to lay a siege to these major cities. But because getting inside the cities, they haven't come with that kind of infantry. We don't see boots on ground that as much as we see tanks and mechanized columns. So to fight street by street and mohalla by mohalla, you really require infantry to come in big numbers. So that has not happened. So if these were the aims, in that case, they seem to have, my view is, this is my personal take, that they seem to have spread themselves too thin. And they have left the western side totally free for the Ukrainian, to give them tactical space and logistic space, because all the bordering countries are sending in aid from the west, and they are unable to stop them. Any movement that is taking place from west, because they simply don't have presence over there. They have spread themselves so thin, even in the east, that too many fronts have been opened up. More than 15 cities have been invested properly. Then I think they would have done better if they had sort of focused on one thing. Let's say the coastal region. If they had focused on the coastal region, deny Ukraine access of sea, and then make a corridor. Or if they're focused only on Kiev, surrounding Kiev, just like we went for Dhaka in 1971 as our center of gravity, then also they could have affected changes. So I would like to end by saying, I think they have spread themselves too thin, and all distributing themselves in penny packets. They have not kept that principle of war, of concentration of force to be applied at the desired areas. Janet Shankar?
Yeah, I'll give a different take on this, right? And understand it in that fact manner. This battlefield has been static, slow moving, laggard, call it what you want, lack of maneuver, everything. For two, three reasons. First and foremost, uh, I don't think this was the plan at all. The plan was shock and awe, finish the whole thing in 1 week. And this kind of extended plan was, operation was never planned. Okay. So this plan has come into being. What was their initial aim? If it was just shock and awe, what was their initial, that was the initial aim. Okay, it didn't achieve. So they didn't have an aim when they started this. They seem to have manufactured an aim, right? That was when Mr. Putin, in the second week of March, said, laid out his 4 war termination objectives, not aims, not the political goal of this thing. So if you look at from those 4 points, they have achieved it. The war termination objectives, they're there. Demilitarization, they've done extensive demilitarization. I don't think Ukraine will ever go back to NATO and say, please take me in NATO, or not, nor will NATO come to Ukraine. Out of question. Not only NATO, all the other countries which border Russia also will not look towards NATO. That to that extent, the larger aim of Russia to keep NATO out has been achieved. I mean, you have to grant it. Okay. Yeah. Now, the thrust from north to Kiev and to Kharkiv had no meaning. I mean, like what General Dua said, they didn't have the boots on ground to capture these cities. But then they've done what they wanted to create a contiguous area between Crimea and eastern Ukraine, barring a few pockets. I don't think they'll let go that. And the way they have reorganized themselves and consolidating to the east, so there's a certain amount of redeployment going on with focus on the east. They might achieve that. That is independence of Crimea and Donetsk. Whether Ukraine accepts it or not, they have it, and in any argument, 90% of holding is the argument. Okay, so they'll not give it up. And in any case, Ukraine doesn't have the capability to dislodge Russia from that part. Okay, so that also has been a demilitarization has been achieved. NATO has been kept out of the equation for a long time to come. If you look at the war termination aims, yes, it has been achieved. But there's another factor which has made this prolonged war sluggish, snailish, is the weather. In this kind of a weather, the kind of force structure which Russia had, uh, they couldn't have done anything more. Okay, this is the time of the Rapustita. That means the mud thaw comes, the ground is boggy, you can't move, and this is historic. The fact that Russia went into this campaign at this most unfavorable terrain time tells you a lot about their poor planning.
Yes.
Look, then Satish Dua took the case of heading towards Dhaka, concentration of force and all. Also, in that entire campaign, India delayed that move to Bangladesh. By from June to November, December, because the weather would have been better then. We would have been better prepared. The water levels in those streams would be lesser. I mean, the riverine terrain there, if you operated, you would know. In rainy season, you can't just cross them. Whereas in December, the water levels go down and they're crossable even by foot. So, and terrain friction reduces. Here, these people have gone in at the maximum terrain friction time, which means maximum logistics, and relying on only predictable arteries.
Despite having experienced it in World War II.
World War II, and it is their terrain. It's not my
Yeah.
terrain. I learned about this as I after this whole thing started. When so to that extent, it was actually poor planning.
Yeah.
If Russia has been able to achieve its war termination objectives, I'm not talking of aims, war termination objectives, it is probably due to sheer brute force, okay, of might, better might. Okay, now having said that, this entire story has also, you have to understand, the battle has been a different kind. It is not the 5G variety, it is not the classical maneuver, it is not the classical, it has been a battle of more of firepower and one sided firepower. Okay, so it is, and plus use of nuclear against a non nuclear state. So there is imbalance in this whole game, right? So that is where I think we need to look at this very carefully, lest we draw poor lessons out of it. If you fall into the Western trap, you'll definitely end up with wrong lessons.
Right.
If you fall into the if you fall into the apparent Russian successes, of say, look, their war termination objectives have been achieved, so they're successful, then again you're going to fall into the wrong trap. There are some important lessons which will come out in due course. Right, this is not the time to start expounding them. Okay, uh, but we have to be a little careful. What we are now establishing some kind of a trend lines which are coming out.
Two very interesting perspectives are showing us what is happening on the ground, and that's something which is important rather than discussing Mariupol and Kharkiv and this and that, because those situations change as we.
Look, I don't think like what Dua said. I don't think Russians ever had a plan of capturing any of these.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't think they ever had a plan of even unfolding three prongs, one in the south and two in the north. I don't think so. Right, and I don't think they expected Ukrainians to resist the way they did. So there's a battle of a lot of unexpected things happening.
I guess there's a whole other lesson in how did the Ukraine actually defend their territory, and we'll talk about that in due course. So talking about, you mentioned, General Shankar mentioned about the war closer reigns, and let's keep it at that. Uh, I'd like to start with you, Jandua. What do you think would be the end game, sir? Now, we have to find a place where things will now stop. And one can see some trickle of discussions on this where the Russians had put out, okay, the agreement is being finalized. Modi Saab is also doing something in the middle. So there's a lot which is happening right now. What do you think are going to be the end games, possible scenarios?
In my view, see, a lot of minds are at work. Turkey is trying. Ukraine has asked for Israel to mediate. You just now said that India has asked Russia, offered to mediate and help when the foreign minister was here. So, and there may be more players that we don't know of. But by and large, my understanding is that the world will have to throw a face-saving measure to Putin also, because he also would not like to be seen. To end this war or to bring it to a closure, he would not like to be seen, not like to lose face, not like to be seen to be weak. So, while General Shankar mentioned that war termination objectives may have been by and large achieved, sanctions are pinching them also. They would like to end it, but they would like to end it on some terms that make them look honorable, to use that word. So we will have to come out with a formula that that appeases the Russian side also. And Ukraine, in any case, the moment Ukraine drags a war beyond a point, Ukraine comes out smelling good in terms of victory. They've suffered a lot of casualties. There are a lot of such loss of men and material, but they have resisted a strong military nuclear neighbor for nearly 40 days already. Shankar?
Well, that may be so as it is, but the fact is that as it stands today, and I don't see much changing, Ukraine's map will change. That is almost a foregone conclusion. You had about more than 4 million refugees, and I suppose equal amount or maybe double that are internally displaced people. You lost all your military capability, or rather, your military major infrastructure, not the hard fighting capability, the infrastructure. So Ukraine is a lost hell of a lot, right? Okay, now look at Russia. Russia might achieve that piece of territory, and it might have achieved hell of a lot. It might have kept NATO out of the equation, all that which I said, but it would lose economically.
Yes.
It would lose hell of a lot economically. Let's be very clear about it. Despite it being a surplus in all kinds of commodities,
It'll take 10 years to rebuild. Or
rebuild.
more.
Yeah, right. So both the countries have won something and have lost something. Look at it from another perspective. Okay, you redraw the map of Ukraine. Ukraine will never become part of NATO, EU, all that. But the fact remains, Ukraine for the next 2 to 3 generations at least, will remain hostile to Russia. Would Russia like to have such a hostile country at its border, which will stoke insurgency and hostility into Russia? The southern belly of Russia is vulnerable now. That is there. You might solve the immediate problem, but you have probably gone into a long-term problem. Okay. So the whole thing, like what General Dua said, depends on the deal. Everyone is going to lose. I mean, this is a no victor war. Everyone is losing. NATO has lost, Ukraine has lost, Russia has lost, and the globe has also lost. All of us have also lost because, right?
But
the face saving for each, unless it is guaranteed, the road ahead is going to be rocky for all of us.
But don't you think NATO has actually gained a little bit? NATO was a marginalized body so far. In fact, Russia has managed to rejuvenate NATO. Also, the defense budgets of Germany, other countries are going up. So Finland and Sweden and Switzerland, which were absolutely neutral, have started at least getting into some sending military aid. So, overall, I think NATO has got a little bit of US was actually being slightly marginalized by NATO. Now its importance is on the up and up. So, to that extent,
Look,
NATO.
no. The the point is that NATO has revitalized itself. I have no doubt. That there's no doubt.
It's found a role for it now.
It has found a role, yes, but its credibility has gone. Its credibility has gone because no one will go to NATO now except those who are already in NATO.
So I mean,
That
already
is, no. The
no
fact
more.
is,
Yes, it won't
yeah,
be able to expand. It doesn't.
it won't be
Yes.
able to expand. And what's more, US credibility has, reaffirmed itself, or incredibility,
Yeah.
whatever you call it. That there you see this word called Ukraine has come into most people's lexicon.
Yes.
Right? Ukraine is what? It carries
Ukraine.
hell of a lot. Okay. The thing got Ukraine is that who's Ukraine whom?
So we used to talk of Vietnamization of
Ah,
Afghanistan, and today
Afghanistan.
we are calling this country
Okay.
Ukraine.
So
And
maybe
you
they
look
put
at
it
it.
from all sides. Sir.
See, another thing. We will talk about USA. The famous, the most famous byline after USA left Afghanistan was that bloody America spent 20 years replacing Taliban with Taliban,
Yeah.
isn't it? Similarly, here you see the analogy. If Zelensky had to come give everything away and abdicate everything with which he started, why did he start it?
True.
Okay, if he had to come 10 days into the war, he said, "I don't want to join NATO," and he said, "I'll talk about Donbass and Luhansk." These are the two things he said. He didn't agree to demilitarization. He didn't agree to Crimea, but he said, I am agreeable to a compromise on that. So if you had to do that in 10 days, why did you do all that? It is something like the same story, Taliban with Taliban. Because the fact that he wasn't supported. He suddenly realized he's not being supported.
A
So
proper mental and then
there are issues. Yeah, all these issues have to be taken care of in this deal, whichever is coming.
No,
I
but
don't know.
to be fair to Zelensky's own issue that which you raised, you see, he could not have agreed to all this without even giving a fight. Then he would have gone. You see, he can't say, "Okay, I am not strong enough to this thing. I don't to match up with the Russian military might, and I don't think I will get anyone to support me actively from the West. So I don't think I can make a match of it." In fact, if anything, despite what you said, you are absolutely right that 2 weeks later he started his utterances started agreeing to the major issues that Russia had raised, but he has sort of rallied the Ukrainians around a spirit that has been
Yeah, on
appreciated by
that
the
there's
world.
no
It is
doubt
best
at all.
help of us.
No, that,
No,
that I don't know.
when Vietnam was a third world country on edge of poverty, and I've lived there for 3 years. I see
I
the great
understand.
determination of the people. Yet after 19 or nearly 20 years, they actually pushed the Americans out. So the point is not how much beating they took. And similarly, my take is that it does not matter how much beating Ukraine took. Ukraine comes out as a hero because the moment it stalemates, Ukraine is seen as
Yeah,
having stood up to the big bully,
I'm
nuclear
not.
big bully, and things like that.
I'm not talking of Ukraine. Ukraine people, the country, great. There's no doubt about it. They put the best foot forward. They fought for their honor. They fought for with great morale. All that. I am not talking of that. I am talking of the NATO and
Yes.
talking of the leader of Ukraine. See, why I am talking of the leader of Ukraine is leaders are supposed to lead their people to peace, stability, prosperity. In that metric, where right, that's all. Otherwise, he's done phenomenal. I've also written that he was inspirational leadership, everything and all. But you have to inspire people to their happiness to some level, and leaders need to be wise at a point of time where to take their people. That's the point I'm trying to make. Wisdom.
Forethought and wisdom, because this Russia has been warning about action for the past 8 years, and Well, it's a in hindsight, obviously, it's something that one must learn as a
Yeah,
leader.
all these things are not something which we can solve in 1 hour and
Yeah.
agree in 1 hour. Right, this will out a lot of analysis and different points of views and all that, and
And
especially in a scenario where it's only one-sided views which are coming,
yeah, and
you
also
can't get.
like I said, like we agreed earlier, that we might have to rephrase and reanalyze and realign our thoughts once the
Thoughts.
whole thing is over.
Whole thing
As
is
everyone,
over. We need to keep an open mind. All these are thoughts which are coming. Which these are also
like you
some of
said,
these thoughts
trend
are
lines,
trend
like you
lines,
said,
and these are, yeah. And these are all emotions also. After all, we
yes,
are also, all three of us are human beings. We also have our own emotions.
Thoughts and emotions and
Yeah.
understanding of various situations. Absolutely.
Yeah.
here only.
So interesting, points of view, as both of the generals are actually saying that there's a lot which we still need to know to actually find out what exactly happened and where. Was Zelensky tricked into something? What did the NATO overstep? Did Russia overstep? Whatever the truth is, it will come out, and we will all know. And I'm sure I'll be able to get both of them to come and discuss as to what exactly happened. Jaldua sir, start with you to close this lovely discussion. What would you like to say?
Well, I think Shankar did allude to this. I think this has been a war of surprises. Russia was surprised that it could not wind it up within a week or so. Ukraine was surprised that it could not get material help, but Ukraine was also from the West, and sorry, I beg your pardon, that the West or the NATO did not come to its help by sending any troops, but maybe it did not expect that. But it was also perhaps surprised at the amount of aid that it got. The US has gotten, I think, 1.2 billion so far. Aid, 1.2 billion worth of military aid has already been flowing or is in the process of coming, and several other countries have pledged so much. The kind of support it has got from the rest of the world in terms of technology and support from especially from the information warfare, especially intelligence. Look how they've been able to pinpoint target, precise targeting of leadership, Russian leadership, military leadership, and so on. So the world at large has been surprised that it did not finish the way we thought it would finish. Now both of them are clinging on tenaciously to their sides of the operation, and it has certainly dragged on beyond the operational and logistic stamina of both the countries, and perhaps the emotional stamina of the world.
Well put, sir.
This let me continue on what this business of surprise. I think all of us have been surprised at the level of violence which has come about in this campaign, which the world had forgotten about. So that's a great surprise. The level of human misery which can get generated out of war is a great surprise, right? And it's not a surprise, but it's some revelation, some kind of a understanding which you come. It's a surprising understanding that this level of violence, if it is reached, is going to harm all of us. There are no victors in such violence. There are only losers. We are staring at a global economic turmoil, a geopolitical turmoil. These three actors, NATO, Ukraine, and Russia, are anyway are all on the losing side. No one has won. So this is a first thing. This is going to be a war without victors, which is a surprise of its own kind, right? And I think this is a war. If you see the history of warfare, it's something which has not happened. It is something which we didn't expect. It was not something which was forecast. It has gone in a different direction. To that extent, it teaches us something that future war might go on the fourth direction. And wars, if you premise them on the last war, the next war will not be like that. And if you think by not premising on the last war and imagining a different direction, that will also not happen. Okay. So one has to look, this is an evolving prism. So I'll leave it at that.
I think the clinchers both of you put out are the closing comments, and all that is the bottom line. I think it's a lose-lose situation, and pretty much how the entire warfare has changed, and everything is so different. And I'm sure when the perspectives of the other side are brought out, if Russia is allowed to do so, uh, we would know a better part of what actually happened on the ground. Of course, there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of comments, and there's a lot of writing which is happening. Even this channel has discussed with various different people about what is happening in Ukraine. But as both the generals very clearly brought out, these are all conjectures. These are analysis of situations as we see them, with sitting so far away. Might be exactly what we are talking about, or might be the complete opposite. Only time will tell. General Shankar, General Dua, sir, thank you so much for joining me for this lovely discussion on Ukraine. Till next time, Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you.